Today on the show, something a bit different. A few days ago, we had Chattanooga's Mayor Tim Kelly and Chattanooga's Police Chief Celeste Murphy in our studio for a town hall to talk about safety and policing. So today we have edited a version of that broadcast right here. My name is Josh Rowe, and this is Tomorrowtown, Tennessee. Welcome to our News Channel 9 Town Hall, Safer Scenic City. I'm Josh Rowe.
And I'm Latricia Thomas. We know that safety is at the top of minds more than ever. That's why we're doing a deep dive tonight into how it affects one of our most populated hometowns.
Let's meet our panelists tonight. Mayor Tim Kelly, Chattanooga's mayor, has been for the mayor just under 3 years now. Chattanooga native, local businessman before all of that, going to City Hall. Thanks for being here today. We appreciate that.
Thank you for having us.
Police Chief Celeste Murphy is also here. I've been about a year and a half on the job.
Yeah, almost 2 years.
25 years in law enforcement.
A little bit more, yeah.
Okay. About 20 years in Atlanta before you came here?
25 years in Atlanta.
25 years in Atlanta. So now we've got the quick resume in.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about this before we get into stats and numbers and these kind of things. There's a lot of assumptions about the job of policing. What do you wish more people who are not police officers understood about the job?
Yeah, and that's where, the partnerships with you guys start. Getting the messaging out there about the good things that we do, some of the different aspects of the job, and just how much the officers and the investigators are dedicated with keeping the city safe.
We were at a summit earlier today about gun violence, mental health organizations there, people from the courts, you guys both there at times, talking to the community. And I asked you this question before. Some of them seem angry. Some of them seem like there's so much out there more to do. And one of the things that stuck with me that you said to them is, we're all in this together. There's not one name for all the stuff that's happening crime-wise. How do you look at all the different things that are happening and say, this is how we're going to make change?
Yeah, I think it started with what you're referencing this morning, and that's what energizes me. The only way that we're going to combat this is by doing this together, and that's one of the reasons why I chose the city, because I saw where, the trajectory of what was going on from city government, and I knew that, it would be a perfect fit for, my philosophy or my, the way I want to move when it comes to combating the safety of any city. It just seemed like it fit well. But when you talk about the frustration from this morning, it really is people are ready to energize together and come collectively together to help, because it's not just one. This problem is not just a police problem. It's not just the mayor's problem. We have to do this together. Yeah. And the only way we're going to combat this is together, and it'll be better that way.
Well, and what Chief just described is what's generally known in the business as community policing, that approach. And it's why we selected Chief Murphy. She has a long background in it, and we share that philosophy. When I came into office, we sort of wrote it all down in the One Chattanooga plan. Public safety is the baseline for all of that, right? I mean, if you don't get that right, none of the rest of it matters. But we do have to take this comprehensive approach. It's not just that we can, the police are just out there locking people up and forget it, right? We have to work. We opened an Office of Community Health at the mayor's office and really began to look at gun violence as a public health crisis, which is what it is. And I spoke, I guess, before you got there this morning, but it made me really happy, that frustration notwithstanding, to see all those community partners in the same room who understand that it is a continuum. This starts in community centers, it starts in schools, addressing the root causes of crime so that, so that we can prevent those shootings from happening. Because the police are gonna do their job. They're going to enforce the law. That's 100% non-negotiable. But our job in city government, a layer or two deeper, is to stop that from ever happening to begin with.
I think the layers are interesting, right? Because this is not just, when you're talking about crime and what to do about crime, it's not just the police, it's not just the mayor's office. You got judges and prosecutors and state lawmakers and federal lawmakers. I mean, there's a lot, it's a complex system, right? How do you explain that as far as that goes, as far as what is your responsibility and where that, goes to somebody else and the whole, layers, like Mayor Kelly said.
Yeah. Well, first thing we got to remind people is that there's nothing wrong with doing having two strategies going on at the same time, the short strategy and the long strategy. So, of course, the short strategy is going to be law enforcement, because we do want to hold people accountable for these violent crimes in our city, to hold them accountable. So what we're doing good right now, CPD, is we are bringing a lot of these cases to resolution. We're bringing closure to these families and these victims. We're good at that, and we have been doing it. And we're sending a message that if you do commit a crime in Chattanooga, you're going to get caught. So that's the first part of it. And then the next piece is make sure that we hand, and thank goodness we do have a good relationship with our district attorney. We hand, a complete investigation over to that entity, and then they carry the torch from there. So this is a collective and total relationship that we've got to have in combating crime.
Yeah, and the last part is the judicial system, right? There are areas where we may need judicial reform, and we have a great relationship with our delegation, and are comfortable having the conversation where that may be necessary. But Chief Murphy's not being as good her own cheerleader here as she should be. Our closure rate for crime here is almost 90%. The national average is around 50. And that's over the course of a couple of years. That is freakishly high.
What have you done to make that number change?
Yeah.
What specifically helps push that?
It's all what I just said. It has to do with, one, making sure we're paying attention to some of those root causes and building programs that help. We look at, what's in the forefront. We're worried about our children that may be going down the wrong path. Finding those programs and those collaborations and relationships with community, as well as government and police, finding those spaces for children to be safe, as well as keep them on the right path. It's also, from the police aspect, we're doing things like finding grants and things like that to help us, support our budget, and finding technology advancements to help be a force multiplier, for us in our mission to combat crime.
I would also just say it's about two other things. Trust.
Right.
Again, it's not coincidental that these numbers went up when Chief Murphy came to work, because it really is about community trust. And when folks see somebody that looks like them, the department is improving in its trust. And our Chattanooga men and women of the Chattanooga Police Department are just good at their jobs. It's an excellent department with a long and storied history. So that's certainly part of it.
You talked about some of those numbers. We're going to get to some things you guys provided us in just a second. Another thing we have, Hamilton County's Health Department just released a public survey today. Most of the respondents were from residents of Chattanooga. It's a list of 27 issues, and they prioritize their concerns. The top 4 listed as major problems in the community were access to affordable housing, affordable child care, gun safety, which is one of the things we're talking about today, and substance abuse, in that order. And of the comments added by people who participated, most were related to healthcare. The second highest was under guns, crime, and violence. So we know it's on a lot of people's minds, obviously.
Yeah, no, again, when we opened the Office of Community Health, which we're still hard at work, and we work with the Hamilton County Health Department, we were, I charged them with filling those gaps and looking at gun violence as a public health crisis, and it is precisely that. We also talk a lot about the social determinants of health, the things that lead people to bad health outcomes, including things like gun violence. And we talked this morning a lot about mental health. Right? Mental health is a huge need in our community, particularly with youth. And so we're working very, very hard to increase the provision of resources to youth and adults, but to address those mental health needs before they become somebody who's lost it with a gun.
And that's a part of what this morning was about. We had different stakeholders in the community there in one room. And what can you add to the pie to be able to help make this complete? We had community resources there. For instance, we had one of the speakers was Brother Kevin Muhammad from the Community Haven, who, gave an example of how police and community work. They go into the community and try to provide resources and access to things that will help, take a step back from the police needing to be there. And that's what we want. We want to have resources in the community so that we don't have to send the police in those areas unless it's something that we have to respond to. We want the community to be nourished before, these things happen and it moves into a path where they become vulnerable.
Chattanooga became part of a larger national discussion on crime just less than 2 years ago.
That's when 6 teens were shot near the aquarium in 2022, and then just a month later, 3 people died and more than a dozen were hurt at a shooting on Macaulay Avenue outside of a bar there. One of the things that came to the forefront of that conversation, Mayor Kelly, your roadmap to end violence. Tell us some of the high points of that and how it's been going since then.
Well, again, as we talked about a little earlier, most of that relates to our work to address the root causes. We recruited a really great team, including Chris Sands, who work in the Office of Community Health, to work with youth to try to, and gun violence interrupters, to intervene before these things happen. The police department also picked up some personnel to help them connect into the community through social media and other ways to stop these things before they happen. And the work is working. Again, a lot of the work with youth takes time, right? It will take years to pay off, but we need to sustain it and stay with it, and it is working.
I think some of the language around that in policing is focusing on the problem, not the crime. Is that part of what you guys talk about?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Speaking of Chris Sands and his shop, a lot of that is just collaborating with them on whether it be events, making sure, we provide the security or just mentor kids, any outreach that we can add ourselves to. And it develops relationships with the children, and so much so that, it's creating programs for us within the department, because we're looking for ways to bring on young adults earlier on the department, be in the culture and employed by the department, and pipeline them hopefully to the police department in some type of role.
Yeah. I should also say we're part of a Partnership for Safety program that the U.S. DOJ, the Department of Justice, puts on. A lot of fantastic resources there. And going back to that, and our gun crimes unit is a really nation-leading, award-winning department. And again, if you can, that super high closure rate of almost 90%. Criminal Justice 101 is if you lock people up for a crime, that is the best single deterrent of crime, and we're doing a great job of that.
And you talk about guns. I know that some of the language, some of the focus has shifted across the years through different police administrations. You had a real focus on gang violence at one point. Then you had the Violence Reduction Initiative, and now more of a gun unit type thing. How does evolving that, is it hard to start another topic? Is it hard to start another focus? Or do you really see change when you narrow down in one thing like guns, like you guys have really looked into?
Right, so we're not necessarily just only focusing on guns. But that's where the majority of the violence can come from. But intelligence on gangs or any other genre is all intermingled within that. So, whenever we use what makes our gun team so successful is that when they focus in on any crime related to a gun, regardless of whether it's involving a gang member, it's a domestic situation, or random, it doesn't matter. We're still going to do the investigation and bring resolution to that case. So they're all still intertwined with us focusing anything that's related to gun violence. It could be any entity that brings us to that crime. But it doesn't change the focus at all.
Right. I think when that change was made, which was actually before Chief Murphy came on, the idea was this is about the behavior, not who's doing the behavior. Again, we're going to follow the lead back to whoever's doing the behavior, but ultimately it is about the people who make the very poor decision to pick up a gun and use it in violent crime.
Right. Yeah. I think your office into some stats over the years and kind of looking at where your department is having some success and those kind of things. And if you look at it across the rate, across the line, homicides per 100,000 people compared to some other cities, some close and some not. Obviously, Chattanooga compares fairly to those cities as well. We talked about clearance rate as well. Chattanooga is doing well in that. When you look at some of these things, right, across the board, right, you can look at any metric and come up with your own, thought around it that is complex in some ways. But how do you think about it when you do see stats that show either progress or things that maybe are stagnant, and where you decide to make those decisions about what to address and how to address it? Yeah.
So what that does, the way those comparisons are laid out, it levels all the cities off regardless of population, right? It gives us a percentage per capita, and that's what evens the field with all of us. But what you do when you get that type of data is you say, okay, One thing we know we're getting right is we're getting our investigations to resolution. We have a great partnership in Chattanooga that's kind of unique. When I speak to other chiefs in other cities, is that we have partnerships with our bordering municipalities around us, police departments, as well as our county departments, our state departments, as well as our federal departments. There's just a relationship there that intermingles the intelligence that all of us gather. We meet regularly. We talk regularly. Yeah. There's no siloing of information, and that's what makes us a great success.
Can you explain that a little further, how it's different here than other places?
I wouldn't say that we're the only model of that, but it's from my own experience and from talking to other chiefs in other cities, we have a great relationship that between all of those jurisdictions that makes us such a success that others don't necessarily have that connectivity. A lot of it may be because of the size of our city, but at the end of the day, I'll take it. You know, it works, and we're going to keep using it.
When you talk about partnership, too, the Hamilton County Sheriff's Office stepping in after the murder of Chris Wright downtown, saying, we want to send our deputies there to help patrol. Has that helped?
Of course. Listen, when I first got here, the first meeting I had within a couple of months of me being here, I had every jurisdiction in the Hamilton County space, all the way up to state officials and federal officials, and we met at my headquarters, and I said, look, this is what I know. This is how I've learned that law enforcement works. We have to work together. So we've always been working. It was nothing new from that incident. It was intentional that we wanted the community to know that this is what's happening. So that's always been there, and this is their jurisdiction as well. So they have always enforced the law within this county.
I just want to say, too, on the slide about homicides per 100,000, that is kind of the gold standard metric. And you hear a lot of things, right? And, you look at social media and people think Chattanooga is not a safe city. Look, one homicide is too many, period. I mean, that's a fact. But we are not even in the same ballpark as a lot of cities we're often compared to. And that's due to the hard work of the men and women of the Chattanooga Police Department.
And the main thing you want to look at is that we're trending down in the last 5 years on our homicides. And that's important. As long as we're tracking on a decline, and that's that's what you look for. Again, one is too many, and I don't think anybody in any city in this country will say, I'm going to get crime down to zero. That's impossible.
Right.
But what we can promise is that our officers are going to work hard when it does happen to bring it to resolution.
Mayor Kelly, you made a great point there about the perception, which you'll see on social media, that kind of thing, right? I don't think people really understand how high your clearance rate is. I don't think that's been said publicly enough. There are people quite, I get it now.
Yeah.
Well, don't take this personally, but I think part of the problem is with the media environment and the social media, because we know that fear sells, and so if you're trying to build followers or sell advertising, a lot of times it's those stories that sell better. But we have some very good news to share here, and the fact of the matter is, all we can do is come and talk to you about things like this with the facts.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate this open conversation and getting to the root of more of these, because the longer time we can take with it, the more we can really dig into some of these issues.
Sure.
Part of the discussion about crime also involves juveniles. And Chief Murphy, I'd love to get your thoughts on this. So when you're looking at crime that involves juveniles, how does that differ for crimes that are committed by adults? How do police look at that?
It doesn't differ from a law enforcement aspect. Of course, the judicial system is a little bit different, and that's where it changes course. Not our wheelhouse, but we still enforce crime regardless of age. But of course, children are my passion. So, besides just the law enforcement piece, I'm very tuned in and locked in. But what else are we doing to get to the root reasons why that juvenile went the wrong path?
One of the things we spoke about today, or you guys spoke about at the summit, was social media and how it comes into the perception of what's going on in a juvenile's life, or showing off, or showing those guns, or things that we didn't have to worry about 20 years ago. How do you see some of that playing into the crime that's happening today and just their thought process behind it?
Yeah, well, it absolutely has a big influence on it. But the good part about it is the police are getting better at social media as well. So it's helping us in a lot of our investigations.
Yeah. Do you have specific officers who sit there and peruse social media looking for things that are about to happen, things that are being threatened, that sort of thing?
We have certain units that specifically specialize in that. But I'll be honest with you, with the younger officers that we have out there, even the ones that answer 911 calls, a lot of them are all engaged with that same, skill set as well. So we have a good portion of our police department that's really, really engaged with that.
When it comes to juvenile crimes, are there things that you wish the community understood that they could do better? Different policies that you wish were in place? How do you feel like things outside of policing could affect that?
Yeah. Just the education that we provide, if we can just keep getting, our messaging out to the community and them coming on board with us, we've got to stand united with this. The community's got to do their part and we do our part together.
Yeah. And I should say too, Mayor Murphy, not quite there yet, but Chief Murphy and I are both members of the Children's Cabinet here locally, which is a really great organization. Includes Dr. Robertson from HCDE, the county mayor, county mayor's staff, Chattanooga 2.0 representatives, and the whole idea is to look at things through the lens of what's best for kids here. And COVID was a nightmare. I mean, as an epidemiological episode, obviously, but really, I had a professor of public health speak to a bunch of mayors during the pandemic and say it was kind of like somebody put their hand in the middle of a waterbed and just pushed down, right? And it just flipped everybody off at the margins. And people went a little crazy, as we all know, right? And it had a terrible impact on kids. So there are a lot of kids who, we have a truancy issue here. We got to get kids back in school. We're still not back. We still don't have the level of kids back in school that we had prior to the pandemic, and that's got to change. So this is a whole of a community approach. It has to be, and we're doing some great work through the Children's Cabinet in order to make that happen, because it really, again, you show me a kid who's not in school, who's 13, 14, 15 years old, I'll show you a problem that's coming.
And some of the issues that come along with that, one of the best speakers I've heard in Chattanooga is Judge Philyaw, one of the juvenile judges, talking about, you're looking at the crime, but what you don't see is an absentee mom or being at home by yourself all night long, or not eating, or being, just so many of these things that play into these court cases and these crimes that people never hear about. They hear the crime, the end result. Well,
and Judge Philyaw is a member of the Children's Cabinet as well. He has some really, really constructive suggestions about how things might change. And I know, I'm told that may be something the legislature takes up at some point soon to think, how might we tweak or change juvenile justice reform for better outcomes?
Right. One of the things that's a success of the Children's Cabinet that we're really now getting the pulse on is that, we as adults, we craft what we feel should be best for the juveniles, but what Children's Cabinet does is it brings in the voice of the child. What makes you safe? What makes you feel safe? What are some strategies that we can do that you think will be more effective? So that's one of the successes of that.
And what have you heard from that? When you get the children to tell you what they want, what make them feel safe, what do you hear?
Well, a lot of them just want a safe place to have entertainment, play. Oftentimes, a lot of pieces that we miss are with education as well as nutrition. And that was one of the things that came up this morning. Kids are hungry. I just recently read an article about a school system that had to do a GoFundMe to pay off the debt of unpaid lunch balances, and that's sad. Why do we have to fight to eat in school? It should be a part of our education, because that's what is one of the deficits in children being able to learn.
And so much of this informs other work we're doing at City Hall. Affordable housing was up on that screen earlier. We talk a lot about that in Children's Cabinet. If you've got a kid that's bouncing from couch to couch, that child is at risk, right? And if they're not getting fed regularly, those are the interventions we sort of need to make to change. And a lot of this informs the way that we're looking at community development differently. And we're going through a big change there in city government to really look at community development centers or community centers as hubs for resources. A lot of what we're doing with the school system on this Community Forward Schools project is exactly that, using them as resource centers so that if a child is at risk and teachers or the principal sees that, they can connect them to nonprofit resources through that adjoining community center, and that work again is working.
The sustainable change and make sure that we tamp down any type of violence as it pertains to our children is to make sure that we do these things that are getting to that root. I mean, we just really have to put more energy into what's what got these children there, not about the act at the time that it's occurring. Let's focus on what got them there.
Right, and again, the kind of the crux of the One Chattanooga plan we talked about this morning is that we can't do this. Chief nor I in City Hall can do this alone. It has to be a whole community approach. Right. And the number of people that were there from the faith community, from the nonprofit community is so encouraging because it is going to take all of us together to fix this.
Yeah. And we'll see some of those people that spoke this morning coming up a little bit later in our newscast. We hear about it all the time, drugs and overdoses taking a toll on communities. According to recent data from Hamilton Counted, 2022 compared to 2023 has seen a decrease in overdose deaths, but since 2018, fentanyl has remained the leading drug in fatal overdoses. According to Hamilton Counted data, fentanyl remains the driver in overdose deaths since 2018. It is a scary drug. It is out there. How often are you guys seeing it? Every day, all the time?
Yeah. It permeates through, the drug culture itself. But successfully, we've seen a drop, 18% in our overdoses compared to last year. So, and I think that speaks to our enforcement efforts increasing. It's giving us a little bit more opportunity to go take the drugs off the street so they're not easily distributed. And so 18% more lives have been affected by that.
It's a big number in the right direction.
And, just in other areas as well, we've increased our DUI enforcement by about 22%. So we're taking unsafe drivers off the road. And sometimes in those cases, you see where alcohol and drugs mix as well. So, we're really increasing our efforts in those areas to make sure we keep people safe. That was an alarming statistic for me, even coming from Atlanta, to hear about how fentanyl was crippling the community here.
Yeah. And when you're talking about the other things we talked about already, right, where you're not focusing on the crime, you're focusing on the people and the problem. With drugs, it's a very different problem because you can arrest people, you can do those kind of things, but that doesn't cure addiction.
Right.
When you think about that as a police department, how do you think about that as far as what do you do for the person long term to fix this, long term?
Well, it speaks to our co-response unit and why we have increased that. We want to, we don't want to victimize or we don't want to criminalize victims of that disease. But when a law is broken, we enforce it. But if we can mitigate an arrest from occurring, then that's the route that we want to approach. We want to more so go after the offenders that are putting that drug out there.
Sure.
Explain a little bit more about the co-response unit.
Yeah. So this actually started. I'd like to take the full credit for it, but it started right before I got here, and so we pair up an officer with a social worker, and it also helps us with our 911 responders. So they're able to see someone in crisis. They call that unit, and they go there and mitigate, do the therapy, do the resources, the outreach, whatever's needed. Referral services that are needed to mitigate that situation, and then our officers can go out into the street and handle crimes and avoid violent crimes in our community. But it's been extremely successful, so much though that we were able to add another team, and we looked in the future to be able to increase that. It's been working wonders, and we're actually a flagship department for other cities that want to create that model as well.
Yeah, I'm not a criminal justice expert, but that was the one thing when Chief Murphy came on that we had already decided. I had done that research with my staff at other cities, and frankly, a little risky putting somebody out there who's a social worker in harm's way. But again, they've done a great job with it, and it has had tremendous effect. It worked exactly as we hoped it would, and so we look forward to expanding that.
At the end of the day, it's what we teach our officers is de-escalation. So they have an expertise that we don't necessarily have, but they're learning from each other. So the officer's there to make sure that the scene is safe, but the social worker dives in, does their job, and usually it's extremely successful.
Yeah, Mary Kelly, you talked about not coming from a policing background, so to speak. There, when you're thinking about policing and resources they need, especially specifically in drugs and these kind of things, what's out there that you're looking at as far as what could help these folks down the road? I
mean, I read a lot, and I defer to the experts. I mean, again, they do a tremendous amount of Chief Murphy and her staff take advantage of all the training available. I talk to other mayors who are in the same. I mean, you become sort of an armchair expert as a mayor at everything from policing to wastewater management, right? And so, and I try to be there as a resource and listen to the best practices and pick up up, and have full faith and confidence in Chief Murphy. And so I may suggest some things to her, but I let her run her department.
Yeah. Another department you said you work well with, the Hamilton County District Attorney's Office, obviously on the prosecution end. Now, we talked to District Attorney Cody Womp late last year about the focus for prosecuting people involved in drug crimes.
We are not trying to prosecute addicts. Of course, it's against the law to have and possess controlled substances. And I'm not saying you're not going to be charged and we're going to have to deal with that. I'm just saying that's not our focus. Our focus is on the high level dealers. There's always going to be addicts, and we need to focus our resources on helping those people, getting them off those drugs like Cadis is doing. We need to focus our prosecutorial resources on the big drug dealers, and that's what we're doing.
Sounds really similar to some of the things you're talking about. And also, if you can get the dealer off the street, you can get some of that trickle-down effect.
Well, and I would echo what General Womp said there. Cadis is a huge asset for Chattanooga. A lot of people don't appreciate how great an asset that is, but the real challenge for us in this community with the city and the county is to really expand those resources, both for addiction treatment and for mental health. And it is a challenge.
Yeah.
We want to deal with some issues now that maybe don't have to do so much with crime, but maybe with police officers and kind of police chiefs even. Some of the things that you're dealing with, hiring, thinking about the mental health and wellness of police officers. I mean, a police officer's job every day, cortisol spikes are daily, dangerous situations can be daily. What are you guys doing to look after your people when you know that situation?
You have to stay conscious of that. So, from the top, I make sure that I drive down the message, through the command staff that we've got to support our people in every measure that we can. We have a very robust peer support. Of course, there's resources through city government, employee assistance programs and things like that. But with police, it seems a little bit more effective when you can talk to someone that understands everything that you're going through. So we have a very robust peer support program, and making sure that we educate our supervisors to look for flags and signals. We talk a lot about mental health, physical health, all of that stuff, and it's going to get better, through this year, 2024. We're going to make sure that we really drive that home. We unfortunately lost one of our sergeants recently, and it really was eye-opening for us to make sure that we keep focus on our mental health and our physical health.
A cadet graduation just last night in the city of Chattanooga, 11 cadets walking across that stage, but that number down from previous years. How hard is it to get somebody to be a police officer right now, not just in Chattanooga, but really anywhere? Yeah,
we've done some things to start to streamline the process internally with our department. We make sure we've made our unit a little bit more intentional and specific about where their job is, so we give them less things to focus on. Our recruitment efforts are going to improve, and I think across the nation a lot of us are having challenges with getting police officers on the police force, as well as just employers everywhere, not even outside of law enforcement. But Chattanooga Police Department is about the best department to work in this region, and we have a lot to offer. There's a lot of roles on this police department that we're going to start making sure we communicate out better, and we're going to reach a little bit deeper in age with our youth and streamline and pipeline them into the process a little bit sooner.
As you mentioned in the break, it's hard to hire a lot of things right now. But you have a specific job that probably is harder to sell than many, because there are a lot of things, trust in the community, the danger of it, all the things, divorce rate, alcoholism rate, we talked about this before, right? Of when people leave the force and how many officers, don't make it to old age, those kind of things. It's a lot of things to really consider when you're talking about policing across the country as a whole.
Yeah, I think it just really comes down to making sure you care for your people and let them know you care about them. You let them know that you have their back. And I think that we're leveling off in our numbers. Our numbers for people retiring early or quitting early has nothing to do with their experiences here anymore. I think that people are realizing again now that there is a passion for this job. When people see and officers on this department, and they talk about the things that they love about what they do, I think now we're starting to get people interested back in the profession.
Yeah, and again, this is another reason why community policing, that model makes so much sense. Because if you're working in a department where the community doesn't support you, where there's antagonism between the department and the community, which is, there are frankly a lot of cities in the United States where that is the case. Chattanooga is not one of them. It's that much more difficult to do the job, right? And so, and again, we also talk a lot, both outside the city and inside the city, about destigmatizing mental health, right? I mean, when I spoke to the cadets graduating last night, and that was what I closed with, right? If you need help, ask for help. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength. I'd say that to anybody, but particularly our police officers, because as you say, the amount of stress that they are subjected to on a daily basis is overwhelming. Most of us could never do it.
And we drive the point home on our department. Everybody's a recruiter, from me down to the cadets. And I think if you were at that ceremony last night, you saw those cadets were absolutely sure about what they wanted to do. And they described how and why they picked the Chattanooga Police Department. And so they'll be our recruiters out there when they hit the streets today.
No doubt. Got a few more minutes here with the mayor and the police chief. We've talked about the One Chattanooga plan quite a bit, actually. And there's always like nuggets in there, if you really read it, that kind of show, I think, some of your philosophy. And there's a line in there that says, change moves at the speed of trust.
That's right.
And it's an interesting point, but you're both, media too for that matter, dealing with situations where you are trying to daily earn trust.
That's right.
How do you go about that? How do you do that? What's that process look like?
Well, I'll go first and then you can go. But I mean, I think it's mainly just being consistent, doing what you say you're going to do, right? And meaning it, right? And doing that over and over and over again. Because, if to use the old analogy from the Peanuts, right? If you've had that, if Lucy's pulled that football away over and over and over again, it's really easy for communities, particularly communities that have been historically disadvantaged, and to just say, to check out and say, I don't care what you say, you're full of it. And I think you just have to continually do the right thing and do what you say you're going to do over and over again.
Yeah, that's what it is, consistency and being direct with people, being honest with people. When you make a promise, follow through with it. And then what we do in policing is, not only do we, take care of, like, we have a victim services unit. So it's not just about solving the crime. We send that unit out and they make sure they bring resources to the family and care on them and love on them until we get through the investigation phase of it. So, and it's also following up with people and saying, this is what's going on in your investigation until it gets to resolution. Just staying and educating people as well, because sometimes people have expectations out of us that's not necessarily always what lines up with what they believe. And it's just, being consistent and being direct.
I saw a moment today at the end of the summit where a mother who had lost her two sons to gun violence, one in Atlanta, one here in Chattanooga a number of years ago, came up to you and hugged you, and both seemed to have tears in your eyes, both of you, and she was looking to you for comfort, and you gave that to her. It seemed that like that connection there happens with these people in Chattanooga that are grieving and want some kind of change, and it's a moment that I think a lot of us don't ever get to see, but it was good to know that there are advocates out there fighting and there are people there listening.
Right.
Yeah. So many people in our community looking for some of those answers.
The reason why is because a lot of people in the community already know me. I'm still trying to meet people, but as much as I can, I try to make sure I embed myself in the community, let people see me, know me. And when they see that I'm authentic about what I talk about, and I follow through with it, and because I'm a mother, so of course, I couldn't, look at another mother who's suffering and not feel some type of way about that. So it's all authentic, and I think people hopefully can see that that's where my heart is.
We can all look at numbers and data and whatever and say this could be better, but the truth is there are a lot of people just across the board in our city, but definitely in the police department, who are trying to do the right thing day in, day out.
That's right.
Yeah, again, nobody bats 1,000, but we get up every day and try. And I think if you look at the long-term trends, they're headed in the right direction. I think we'll continue to head in the right direction. I'm very hopeful that our gun violence prevention work in particular with youth is really just now getting traction. So, we'll see. Again, we wake up every day and put on the uniform, or this is, I guess, my uniform, but and go out and do it again. We'll see how this year stacks up. But we're really starting to gain momentum, and I'm very encouraged.
I want to just say this. Thanks for being here today. I don't think we've been here for more than a decade. I've had an hour of live TV to sit down and talk to the mayor and the police chief specifically about policing in our city. And I think these conversations need to happen more often. So thank you for being here.
Definitely.
Happy to come back.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you
we'll
for
tell
having
these
us.
stories along the way as that change continues to happen.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Mayor Kelly and Chief Murphy. Here in Chattanooga, we've had some sad news this week with the passing of American hero and Medal of Honor recipient Larry Taylor. We have talked about Captain Taylor on this show many times. His funeral is next week. So we are going to take a few weeks off to honor this hero and reflect on his service to this country. A brand new episode coming soon on Tomorrowtown, Tennessee. This podcast is a production of News Channel 9, Fox Chattanooga, and Sinclair Broadcast Group Chattanooga. We hope you join us again real soon.